I realize this morning how much the celebration of Christmas has changed for me, and that, I used to be so excited about opening presents and the whole glory of the morning, and now I find I'm just so excited that everybody's gone, and the house is clean, and I'll have a moment to myself. And we had that on Christmas morning. It was just Peggy and I in the house on Christmas morning. So I sat down with nothing to do, nothing to get ready. And I sat in a chair and I watched one of my favorite things to do. I like to go back on YouTube and watch the previous week's episodes of CBS Sunday Morning Show. And so I watched one of the features that they had this week was the history behind the 1741 oratorio Messiah, composed by George Frederick Handel. And this work is most commonly referred to as Handel's Messiah. Singing it or listening to it is a Christmas tradition in many circles, and it is very much a tradition in our family. It is the most listened to, recognizable, or it is the most listened to, recognizable composition in music history, owing in large part to its almost continuous performance since 742, when it was first performed in Dublin, Ireland. The thing that was disappointing about the CBS Sunday morning episode, as I sat there and I watched it, was how much the reporters and the people they interviewed subtly distance the piece from the Christian faith. For example, they reported, and I quote, the words actually came from Charles Jenin, who was working out a kind of philosophy of living. And statements like Handel's message is ultimately about hope. Now, I enjoyed the piece, but at the same time, how can you remove the good news of Jesus Christ from a piece titled Messiah, a piece whose entire script is taken from the Bible and the Anglican Book of Common Prayer? It's like if you've been on Tuesdays at 10 in our Bible study, we will hit sections from Messiah, and even as you're reading them, you want to sing them. They're actual words from the Bible. These are not Charles Jenin's words, nor Handel's message, nor some personal search for meaning or philosophy about living, unless the person proposing the work is returning to faith, or the rituals of faith to find stronger meaning and greater hope in their life and living. Like Christ's life and our faith, Handel's Messiah has three big movements. It's the birth, it's the crucifixion and resurrection, and then it closes with redemption. And as a ritual, we sing it, we listen to it, and return to it. But if we don't connect it to a Christian way or philosophy of living, what good is the ritual? In the series at How Does a Weary World Rejoice, the authors proposed a simple question about today's message and today's reading. How do our sacred rituals root us and help us live into new chapters with courage? In its proper place, Handel's Messiah helps us sing the good news of new life, of resurrection, of hope. It literally helps us sing the Bible. And given its popularity, that exceeds most musical pieces, because the audience must be experiencing something more than just notes when they go to hear it. Christmas afternoon, Peggy and I, we went for a walk, and the streets were just completely empty. I mean, there were no stores, and even a lot of gas stations were closed on Christmas Day. It was hard not to notice the silence and movement in a culture so addicted to movement and shopping. The quiet made me think about how rarely this happens anymore. I mean, holidays that used to inspire Sabbath rest no longer inspire participation. I mean, I was even thinking about it at Thanksgiving, because Thanksgiving was not that quiet. And has anybody noticed how busy Labor Day is now? I mean, Labor Day, it was designed to give you a rest from labor, and it's now one of the busiest days I've ever been around. It is a hot shopping day. Christmas Day might be one of the last universally recognized holidays in our culture, meaning people stop to celebrate and recognize the importance of rituals for communicating identity. Christmas in the U.S. is a holiday that we have to admit really transcends religions, cultures, regions, and socioeconomic parameters. Now, I am not a culture war person, not a let's put Christ back into Christmas kind of guy, mostly because I find that kind of approach encourages people to hate their neighbor in the name of a person who sought to love and embrace those who excluded by the faith. But that being said, this Christmas I have noticed more than ever how much our national identity revolves around this season. Hallmark has made an empire around Christmas movies. There is radio stations which switch their entire programming to Christmas music, sometime in September too, you know. And you can't go into a store not playing Christmas music. Our economy depends upon Christmas shopping. Jobs depend on the Christmas push. And yet we're told to say Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas. And it was really funny. It kind of got noticed because I went into a store that literally 95% of the store was committed to Christmas items. I mean, Christmas items. I bought something and I said, Merry Christmas. And I walked away and the person goes, oh, Happy Holidays. I'm like, well, you're the one selling Christmas stuff. People celebrate Christmas, whether they're religious or not. And the whole meaning of Christmas has emerged from the culture that sometimes does and mostly does not include Jesus. And there are times when Jesus is put into the story in ways that leave me confused about who and what Jesus is to people. For example, before Christmas, Doug and Jeannie Hufford invited Peggy and I to go to a Christmas-themed dinner theater. And it was really a wonderful time, great meal. And we all agreed that the play could have used some better inspiration. But we had fun anyway. But as the play came to a conclusion, I didn't want to ruin the mood, because sometimes if you invite a pastor along, they can ruin the mood really, really quickly. But in my head, I started going all pastor on the images of the play. What were they, the author and the crowd, saying about Christmas and about Christ? So the play covered all the rituals of the season. There was singing, there was present giving, there was family conflict and turmoil, everything we know about Christmas. There was displaced people finding new friends and connection. But at the end, out of the blue, one of the characters goes off on a baby Jesus is king speech. And it just seemed so displaced from everything that was going on. And what made it a little bizarre for me as a pastor is the speech came when a group of people one was dressed as Santa, the other were reindeers, there were a whole bunch of elves running around, and they just stopped this musical number and started going on this Jesus is king speech. Up to this point in the play, there was no talk about church. And one passing comment about if someone could squeeze in the 4 o'clock worship or not. And the person giving the Jesus speech was dressed as an elf. Now, and even as I listened, I'm not sure why Jesus was the king. It was more like at Elvis's king speech, and they just took Elvis out of it and put Jesus in there. But ultimately, the play that was supposed to be entertaining, it was. And it was not designed as a religious experience. But between that play, adding a faith element, and the Messiah presented as not about faith, but a personal improvement plan, I felt confused. I felt how confused people are about what Christmas means. Because clearly Christmas has its rituals and its claim to part in the American culture. But I think we're confused about what and why. What does Christmas mean? And it's not necessarily a question, you can think about that yourself, but I was really thinking about it for myself. In our scripture today, Mary and Joseph go about the rituals of family and faith by bringing their baby to the temple. And the ritual of circumcision is a religious ceremony that people have been doing for about 1,000 years. And we're not trained in the rituals of Judaism, but this story is intended for Jewish audiences and who do know the practices. So when they read this, they know what is happening. You see, after birth in Judaism, a mother is impure for 40 days. And when 40 days are done, she is to bring an offering with the child to the temple, which the priest will sacrifice and restore her purification. Now, every firstborn child in Judaism, whether human or animal, belongs to the Lord. With humans, because they belong to the Lord, they are dedicated in the temple to serve the Lord. But there's also more taking place in Luke. Luke is drawing on the story of Hannah in the first chapter of Samuel. When Hannah, who had no children, prayed to God for a son, she vowed that if she had a son, she would give him to God for all his days. And indeed, after Samuel was born, Hannah brought him to the temple, and he was lent to the Lord for life. Thus, in the same way, Mary and Joseph are dedicating Jesus' whole life to God. They didn't have to do that. They chose to be faithful. Jesus' holiness is more than biological. Despite everything we read and hear about prophecy and the source of life, Jesus will be holy because he is faithful to God. When the rituals are done, a holy man named Simeon picks Jesus up and holds him and declares, "Now, Master, let your servant go in peace according to your word, because my eyes have seen your salvation." Because my eyes have seen salvation is key to Jesus. Because the miracle, beyond the miracles, beyond the fulfillment of rituals and the human arguments and wars that will emerge out of future generations who claim to follow this child, Jesus is salvation, a light of hope for Jews and Gentiles, not just followers of the way. Even his name means God will save. The salvation is not just at end times, but in a daily event to be a light in darkness and hope in despair. As the author Charles King pointed out in Handel's Messiah, it offers light and hope when both are in short supply. What possible basis or hope could there be when all you have is this evidence around you which suggests otherwise? And that is Jesus in a nutshell. People follow the way of Jesus to be saved from despair and from hopelessness. I cherish the rituals of Christmas when I was a child. If there were anything that I could go back and experience just one time, it would be Christmas Eve and morning in the home that I grew up in. But if I was honest about all those rituals, they were very much like that Christmas play we went to see. There's this mixture of religion, there's a mixture of Santa Claus and elves and all these little stories that you bring up. There's a lot of food, there's presents. It's just not everything that's truly connected to the birth of Jesus. But Christmas Eve worship was the high point. But that was always a service that was better than any other. It was the one you wanted to go to because I might actually stay awake during it. There's great music and there were great things going on, and it was always shorter. If I expected Christmas Eve worship every Sunday, I was going to be sorely disappointed. But no, faith, a trust that Jesus saves Jews and Gentiles was a way of life that Christmas was just one small part of, not the evening holding it all together. How we lived that faith on some idle Wednesday morning in March, or some Tuesday afternoon in July, or some weekend in September was much more important than any one evening or season. We never spoke of Jesus as King. God was Emmanuel, God with us, who taught us to be compassionate to all, who guided us to exercise patience and love beyond above anger and rage. And Jesus was the one who listened and responded to the thoughts and concerns deep within my heart and your heart. Jesus was the one who healed and forgave even when I was broken or my actions caused fracture. Jesus is a hope-filled alternative way to live when the world gives nothing but the contrary. And I do look at my own children and I worry. For 500 years, both Peg's family and my family have been dynamically shaped by this gospel story. Not as a mystery, not as a miracle, but as a way of living. If you go over into western Wisconsin, on either side of the Apple River, there will be Emmanuel Lutheran Church that was started by the Elkin family, and on the other side is our Savior's Lutheran Church that was started by my grandmother's family, the Olson family. Will my kids continue that generation of belief? Not out of just a cultural identity, but their children will be shaped by hope in a hope-starved world and by the promise of new life. Amen.